We experience relationship with Hashem at three completely different levels, the deepest of which is accessible to us on Yom Kippur. So let's summarize what the three levels are. The first, most common way that we engage with Hashem is by doing the things that Hashem asks us to do. In other words, fulfilling mitzvahs. And every time we do a mitzvah, that binds us with Hashem and deepens our relationship and connection. If, God forbid, we ignore what Hashem wants from us, or we do something which is clearly forbidden by Hashem, that loosens or disconnects or weakens our relationship with Hashem. And then we need to dig deeper and find the next layer of our relationship, which is what expresses in teshuvah. Teshuvah means I'm going to return to who I truly am, not the part of me that was misaligned, but the essence of my being that is connected to Hashem in spite of the things that I've done. And when I dig that deeply and I find the teshuvah, which is something I can achieve any day of the year, but is more accessible in the period from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur, then the depth of my relationship with Hashem is far more profound than it was just simply because of doing the right things. But if I get to the core of who I am, who I really, really am, not just who I am constructed out of the things that I do, or even as a result of this depth of connection to Hashem that supersedes the things that I've done, if I get to the real core and essence of who I am, then my relationship with Hashem is absolute, it is immutable, it can never shift. Which means it's effectively like finding my spiritual DNA. DNA doesn't change. There is nothing in the world that we could do to change who we are on a submolecular level. These are our genes. This is us. This is our DNA. You can't swap it out. You can't grow it. You can't exercise it in a gym. You can't improve it through therapy. You can't lose it through negligence. And it's exactly the same with our own soul. At the end of the day, in spite of the layers of stuff that we pile onto ourselves, usually through poor choices, the self that lies deep beneath those layers remains the same. If you had to imagine, for example, subterranean water, which we want to access because we want to have a well. So we've got to dig through rock and through sand until eventually we access that water. But the water does not become more or less water depending on whether or not we get through the rock and the sand. The water is always there, and it is always pure, and it is always refreshing. It's just that we didn't know about the water, or we didn't have the apparatus to be able to access the water. And it's exactly the same with the core of our soul. It's always there, it's always whole, it's always connected to Hashem, and it is the truth of who we are. It is the most real version of ourselves. But we spend so much time showing a persona to the world or chasing things that appear attractive to us, but actually are quite transient, that we lose touch with the essence of who we are. Now, what makes Yom Kippur so special is Yom Kippur takes us out of the world and strips away a lot of the stuff. We're wearing similar clothes, everybody's in white, we don't have our fancy leather shoes, we're not eating and drinking, we're disengaged from much of the materialism of this world and instead are focused on ourselves, or more correctly, on our souls. Because this is the time of the year where that core of who we are, that immutable Jew, what some will call the Pinteleyid, that spark of Jewishness that nothing and nobody can harm or contaminate, and certainly not eradicate, that is the part of us that we're feeling on Yom Kippur. And that's why Yom Kippur is so compelling. That's why so many people participate in Yom Kippur, because it really just speaks a language that ordinarily we don't speak, and is the language of every single person's soul. That's why there is a discussion in the Talmud about the possibility that Yom Kippur, just because it is Yom Kippur, is already enough to cleanse us, to achieve atonement. Because if we think of atonement as a process whereby I did X and it wasn't healthy and now I'm trying to repair it, well then unless I put in all of that effort to actually do the repair work, nothing's going to change. And even if I see Yom Kippur as a day which is so uniquely positioned for Teshuvah, the reality is that Teshuvah is still something that I have to do. Whereas if I recognize that Yom Kippur is peeling away all the extraneous layers of who I am and what I do to discover the core soul that never shifts, never shrinks, never is dislodged from its connection to Hashem, then I realize actually atonement does not mean repairing and patching up holes in my soul. Real atonement means discovering the truth of my soul. And that is a light bulb moment that can happen in a flash, and therefore the essence of the day can atone for me. Just because this is a day that exposes my essence, the truth of who I am, automatically and immediately, all of the stuff that shouldn't have been part of my life is completely irrelevant, and I'm connected again to Hashem.